Based on feedback from our users, we have begun implementing new features to let our Realtrac users capture more quality-oriented data within the Realtrac Performance ERP system. As a step towards that goal, we have added the ability to capture some inspection data in the system. Just as a general overview of the functionality and the topics we are about to cover, this new feature will allow you to do the following. Define specific employees as inspectors. Mark specific workstations as stations an employee may use for inspection purposes. When an inspection-enabled employee logs in, they will be prompted, asking if they are running the operation normally or as an inspector. If logging in as an inspector, they will be able to tell Realtrac what type of inspection they are doing. First piece or pieces, final piece or pieces, in process, receive, or sort. Realtrac will track the costs associated with these inspections independently of traditional shop floor logins. Realtrac also has updated all costing reports to break these costs out separately. All right, so let's start out taking a look at how to make an employee an inspector. Logging into Realtrac with administrative privileges, I am going to load the system group and head on over to our employee tab. When I click on a specific employee, you may notice we have a new role in the employee role list titled Inspector. On this system here, you can see that Mr. Ed Davis has the inspector role enabled as it is darkened, but the shop floor user Matt First does not have the inspector role enabled. Adding this only affects what the employee will see when they log into an operation. It does not change any other permissions on the system. Also, while we are in the system group, let's pop over to the Workstation tab. You'll note on this tab we have added a new column titled Inspection Station. With this checkbox enabled, when an inspector logs in, they will be presented with an option to log into one of these special stations instead of the normal center or station that defaults for the router. Otherwise, stations marked as inspection stations are completely normal and will continue to operate in a normal manner. Alright, so we see how simple our setup is. Let's have two different users log into the same operation, and we can see the differences when an inspector logs in as opposed to a normal shop floor employee. Before we begin logging into our operations, let's take a look at the router we're going to log into and discuss what's about to happen for a second. I'm going to pull up my job 15J1542 and pop over to my router tab. So I'd like to point out operation 20 here. This is a setup operation for our saw. We've estimated the employee is going to take 90 minutes setting up the saw, captured here in op 20, before we begin sawing the remaining pieces in op 25. Note that at the top of the router, we have a setup quantity of 1. This indicates to Realtrac we're expecting this setup operation to generate 1 good final piece, meaning op 25 is only going to produce 20 good pieces, not the full 21 that is set of the quantity to manufacture within the job. So we're about to have our normal shop floor employee log into op 20 to set up the saw, run a piece, and then ask our floor quality rep, in this case Ed Davis, to come over, inspect the first part, and then record the status of that piece, either good or scrap. If we recall, the employee Matt First was a normal shop floor employee without inspector privileges. So we're going to have Matt log into job 1542, op 20, as if you've logged into a normal Realtrac operation. You'll note it looks exactly the same as it ever has. Through the power of our imagination, we're now going to pretend Matt has finished his 90-minute or so setup and has produced our final piece for inspection. At this point in time, the employee is free to mark the piece as being completed, but in the end it won't matter. If an inspector logs into a setup operation, then their determination of whether the piece is good or scrap takes precedence. So we'll see in this case Matt can note there is, in his opinion, 1 good piece, but this may change later. Now Matt has completed his work. He will fetch his quality manager or whoever is on the floor as an inspector and ask them to test the quality of their piece. So in this case, Ed Davis, our inspector, logs in. You'll note when he logs in, he gets a special interface. First, the inspector is asked about their intentions logging in. Are they logging in to an operation normally, or are they logging in as an inspector? And if they are logging in as an inspector, what type of inspection are they doing? We will choose the first piece inspection from the list. Secondly, the inspector quite likely will be taking the piece to another workstation in order to fulfill their inspection duties. So Realtrac will ask the user if they wish to override the selected station and choose from one of the stations that have been flagged as being used for inspection purposes. This is important since the costs associated with the inspection station may be drastically different, higher or lower than the actual station that is producing the goods. Alright, so our inspector is logged in. Once again, we will pull a Scooby-Doo trick and imagine our inspector has completed the inspection and determine that the part is good. They will log out of the operation, mark it as good, a completed piece, and close the router out. You'll note that if we pop back over and look at the router, we only have one piece complete, not two. Even though our floor employee Matt logged one completed piece, then our inspector Ed Davis marked one completed piece, we only show one because what the inspector says is gospel. If the inspector had marked the piece as scrap, we would override the floor employee's input and only show one scrap piece generated by the operation. Alright, so hopefully at this point we understand setting up the system and our inputs, how we can log in as an inspector, and what happens when an inspector logs in. Now let's take a look at our outputs. Let's see how we can glean this information back out of Realtrac. I'm going to pull open my job 1542 and go to my costing tab and click on the reports button. Realtrac provides three main costing reports when looking at one individual job: our overall cost summary report, job cost summary report, and our job cost detail report. Let's take a look at each of these. On the overall cost summary report, you can see over here on the left under our labor and overhead heading, we will now break out and include a breakdown of each inspection type. We've only completed a first piece inspection on this job, but if we had completed any final piece, in process, receiving, or sorting inspections, these costs would also be captured and presented here as well. This is a nice report to break down the overall costs, but if you're interested in which operations were logged in by your quality team, you'll need to run one of our other costing reports. Taking a look at the job cost summary, you can see we summarize each router operation independently. So we have captured costs for router operations 10 and 20, as we see here, but we also now have a router operation that is listed as 20-1. The -1 indicates that this was a first piece inspection. And other sort operations would be -F for final inspection, -P for in process, -R for receiving, and -S for sort inspection logins. We tally up the costs associated with the first piece inspection on operation 20. This report would be great if you are doing various inspection steps at various points in the router and you want to know the specific costs for each of those inspection steps. If you want even more detail, the job cost detail report gives you just that. When we run this report, we see the same basic outline as we saw in the previous report, including information on operation 20-1. But in addition to the summary information, we also see every work session that was logged in to that router. So here we see in fact that Ed Davis was the employee that logged in as the inspector, the station they used, and how long the session lasted. Okay, we've run through our introduction to the new inspection capabilities within the Realtrac Performance ERP. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments. All of our features come from our customers, so we appreciate all the feedback we are able to get. Let us know what we can help you do to win the business race.